The halls of Casterly Rock were silent when the raven arrived. It bore no royal seal, no house colours, just a plain scroll tied with black ribbon. Maester Tycon handed it to Lord Tywin himself, a rare event that even the old Maester hesitated to explain. Tywin Lannister opened it without a word. He read the letter once, then again. His golden eyes did not blink. The scroll revealed a secret buried for nearly 2 decades, that Jon Snow, Ned Stark's bastard, was no bastard at all. He was the son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, a legitimate heir, born in secret, hidden to protect him from Robert Baratheon's hatred. Tywin didn't rage, he didn't gasp. He simply stared at the words in his hand like they were pieces on a battlefield, and in his mind they already were. He stood up slowly from his chair and walked to the window of his solar. The sea crashed below the cliffs. A storm was coming, not just in the skies above, but across the 7 kingdoms. If this information ever became public, it would change everything. The North would rise, the Targaryens would have a claim again, and Jon Snow, the quiet boy at the wall, could challenge every name written in royal ink. But Tywin Lannister saw beyond bloodlines. He saw power. And power was not just about who had the better claim, it was about who struck first. That night he summoned Kevan and sent out 5 separate letters, none with the full truth, only enough to place eyes and ears where he needed them. The Wall, Winterfell, Old Town, Dragonstone, and one to a man who owed him a favor in the east. Each move calculated, quiet. He wanted to know more about the boy. What kind of man was Jon Snow? What did he believe in? Who did he follow? Who could he betray? In the Red Keep, meanwhile, Queen Cersei had no idea that her father now held a truth greater than wildfire. Tywin didn't trust easily, but he trusted patterns, and what he saw now was a pattern of danger, a Targaryen in hiding, the same bloodline that once burned men alive for pleasure. The same name that Robert and Jaime had risked their lives to end, and here was the last spark of that fire, hidden beneath fur and snow. But this time, Tywin would not wait to clean up the ashes. He called for his fastest rider. "You'll go to Castle Black, watch the boy, speak to no one, learn everything." The rider hesitated. "My lord, he is just a bastard." "No," Tywin said coldly. "He is not." The snow fell thick and heavy by the time the Lannister rider reached Castle Black. He wore no house sigil, just a plain black cloak like any traveller. He asked no questions at the gate and offered no stories by the fire. But his eyes watched everything, especially the young man with dark hair and grey eyes who moved through the courtyard with the weight of duty on his shoulders. Jon Snow didn't look like a prince. He trained like a soldier, ate like a servant, and carried himself with the quiet discipline of someone who had never been praised too much or too often. But the Lannister spy, a man named Ser Darren, saw something beneath it. Jon Snow led without trying. He earned respect without raising his voice. The others followed him, trusted him. And that, more than his blood, made him dangerous. Back in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister read every report with growing concern. Jon Snow was no spoiled lord's son. He was sharp, honourable, and surprisingly humble. In some ways, he reminded Tywin of Ned Stark, but colder, more distant, like someone who had never truly belonged and had grown tired of pretending. Tywin leaned back in his chair. If he were younger, he might have used the boy, moulded him. But time had made him careful, more brutal than bold. And this wasn't just some bastard at the edge of the world. This was a potential king, one with the blood of ice and fire, Stark and Targaryen. If he ever claimed his birthright, if the people believed in him, he could unite the North, rally the old Targaryen loyalists, and threaten the Iron Throne. Tywin couldn't let that happen. But he also knew that killing the boy would raise too many questions. Jon was at the wall, under the protection of the Night's Watch. The last thing Tywin wanted was to stir that nest of oaths and honor. No, he needed something quieter. A trap, a reason to pull the boy south. So he began spinning the lie. He wrote a letter in secret, forged in Ned Stark's handwriting, claiming Jon was to be legitimized and granted land in the south. The letter was never sent directly to Jon. It was sent to Maester Aemon, with instructions to read it aloud in front of the Brothers of the Watch. The plan was simple. Let ambition pull Jon Snow away from his vows. Let the men of the Watch see him as a traitor. Let him fall from grace on his own. But Maester Aemon, old and nearly blind, was no fool. He read the letter alone in his chambers and said nothing. He recognized the style but not the soul of Ned's words. And something deep in his ancient blood whispered that this letter was poison. Instead of reading it aloud, Aemon called Jon to his chamber that night. "There is a letter," he said quietly, "that claims to carry your uncle's wishes. It offers you land, a name, even a future far from this place. But it is not your uncle's hand that moves behind it." Jon looked confused. "You think it's a trap?" "I know it is," Aemon said, "and I believe it comes from the lion's den." Jon's brow furrowed. "The Lannisters?" Aemon nodded. "The only question is why they are watching you at all." Jon felt the cold press deeper into his chest. Why would Tywin Lannister care about a bastard at the wall? "Be careful," Aemon warned. "The Lannisters do not waste their time on shadows, unless those shadows have the power to cast long, dangerous light." Jon left the chamber with more questions than answers, but in his gut something twisted. The name Lannister brought back memories of Catelyn's cold stares, of his father's silence, of whispers he was never meant to hear. And suddenly, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Jon didn't sleep that night. The words of Maester Aemon played over and over in his head. Why would Tywin Lannister, the richest and most powerful man in the realm, care about him? He was just a bastard, a Snow, a watcher on the wall. The very idea that someone like Lord Tywin was trying to trap or manipulate him made no sense. Unless he wasn't who he thought he was. Jon remembered something strange, a moment long buried. He was maybe 10 years old, standing outside Ned Stark's solar at Winterfell. The door had been slightly open. He'd only heard a few words before a servant pulled him away, but they stayed in his mind. He can never know. If Robert finds out, he had always assumed it was about something else, maybe one of Robert Baratheon's bastards, maybe something political, but now it felt personal. The next morning, Jon stood at the top of the wall, watching the sun struggle to rise over endless snow. He didn't speak, not even when Sam came to stand beside him. His thoughts were elsewhere. If his life was a lie, who had lied to him? And why? In King's Landing, Tywin received a raven from Castle Black, not from his spy, but from Maester Aemon himself. The message was short and direct. "The boy knows someone is watching him. You are playing a dangerous game, Lord Lannister." Tywin crushed the letter in his hand. Maester Aemon had once been a Targaryen, a forgotten old relic of a dead dynasty, true but still dangerous. His words meant that the old man had sensed something, and if he whispered the truth to Jon, even a little of it, the boy might start asking the right questions. That could not be allowed. Tywin decided he would take no more chances. He wrote a private letter to King Robert, one worded carefully, but designed to do exactly what it needed to: plant suspicion. In it, Tywin claimed that Jon Snow might not be Ned's bastard after all, but something worse. He did not name Rhaegar. He didn't need to. He only hinted using phrases like the dishonor that occurred at the Tower of Joy and a boy born in war, raised in falsehood. He knew Robert's mind, knew how easily the king's rage could be turned toward old enemies. Tywin didn't need proof, he just needed doubt. He knew what Robert would do with it. Back at the wall, Jon's unease grew. He spoke with Sam about the letter Aemon had received. "Maybe it's a mistake," Sam said hopefully. "Maybe Lord Tywin just heard something wrong." Jon shook his head. "Tywin Lannister doesn't make mistakes. Not like this. He doesn't send forged letters for no reason." "So, what are you going to do?" Jon stared out at the snow. "I need to find out who I really am." And that was when another raven arrived. This one carried the royal seal. Maester Aemon opened it in front of the senior brothers. The message was clear. Jon Snow was summoned to King's Landing by royal order. The brothers argued immediately. Some said it violated the vows of the Watch. Others claimed they had no right to keep a man from answering the king. Jon remained silent. Until finally, Jeor Mormont spoke. "You've done good work here, Jon. But if the king himself demands your presence, we cannot stop you. Just remember who you are and who you serve." Jon nodded, but deep inside, he no longer knew the answer. Was he a bastard of Winterfell, a brother of the Night's Watch? Or was he something else entirely? As he packed his things, Jon felt it this trip to King's Landing wasn't just a summons. It was the beginning of something bigger, something dangerous. And somewhere in the Red Keep, Tywin Lannister was already preparing his next move. The road from Castle Black to King's Landing was long and bitterly cold, but Jon Snow welcomed the solitude. He rode with a small escort, 2 brothers of the Watch, and 3 royal guards sent from the capital. None of them spoke much. That suited Jon fine. Every mile south brought more confusion and unease. He kept asking himself, why summon me now? Why me at all? The king had never shown interest in the Night's Watch, and yet here he was, being pulled into the heart of the realm, summoned like some noble lord instead of a forgotten bastard. When they reached the gates of King's Landing, Jon felt the weight of the city press down on him. The streets stank of sweat and wine, full of shouting merchants, armored knights, and beggars with missing limbs. He had never seen such chaos, and he hated it instantly. The Red Keep was worse. It was not a castle built for safety or warmth, it was built for intimidation. Red stone, high towers, and shadowed halls filled with whispers. Every guard wore Lannister red. Every servant walked fast and looked away. Jon was taken to a guest chamber, far from the dungeons, but even farther from the royal court. He wasn't told why he was there. He wasn't told who would see him. For 3 days he waited. On the 4th morning, a knock came at his door. It wasn't King Robert. It was Tywin Lannister. Jon stood quickly. Tywin walked in without a word, his lion-shaped brooch gleaming on his cloak. He did not sit, he simply stood there, eyes cold, hands clasped behind his back. "You know who I am," Tywin said. Jon nodded. "Lord Tywin." "Good." Tywin stepped forward slowly, like a judge inspecting a criminal. "You're probably wondering why you're here." "I am." Tywin studied him, silently. "You are not who you think you are." Jon's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Tywin tilted his head slightly. "Your father, Eddard Stark, was a man of honor. Too much honor, in truth. He carried many burdens for others. Some of them were lies. Lies. Like you." Jon said nothing. But his jaw clenched. Tywin's voice lowered. "You were not born in the north. You were born in Dawn, at the Tower of Joy, during Robert's rebellion, and you were not born to Eddard Stark." Jon's heart pounded. "You were born to Lyanna Stark," Tywin said, "and Rhaegar Targaryen." Jon stumbled back a step, as if the words had struck him. "That's not possible," he whispered. "That's not—" "It is," Tywin said sharply. "And now you understand why you are dangerous, why you were hidden, why your uncle lied." Jon's mind reeled. He couldn't breathe. The world tilted. Targaryen? Him? He had heard stories of the mad kings, dragon lords, death and fire. And now he was one? "Why are you telling me this?" Jon finally managed to ask. Tywin's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because this secret will destroy the realm. And you, boy, are standing in the center of it." Jon stared at him, eyes wide. "If I'm a Targaryen, why not kill me?" Tywin raised a brow. "Who said I won't?" For a long moment, they stood in silence. The lion and the dragon, the past and the future. Finally, Tywin turned toward the door. "You may leave this room, you may walk the halls, but do not speak of what you've learned. If you do, I will end you, quietly, permanently." Jon's voice was tight. "Then why tell me at all?" Tywin paused. "Because I want to see what kind of man you truly are. A bastard? A Targaryen? A threat? Or an ally?" And with that, he walked out. The door shut behind him like the closing of a tomb. Jon sank into the nearest chair, shaking. Everything he knew was gone. His name, his past, his honor, even his father's love felt like a lie now. He was alone, truly alone. The days that followed passed in a blur. Jon walked the stone corridors of the Red Keep like a ghost. Guards watched him, servants avoided his eyes. He was not a prisoner, but he wasn't free either. And now, with Tywin's words echoing in his mind, everything felt unreal. Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, hidden by Ned Stark, lied to since birth. He tried to make sense of it, but the truth came like a storm. If it was real and deep down, he knew it was then his entire life had been built on a foundation of shadows. Ned Stark, the man he had loved and respected more than anyone, had lied to him every single day of his life. Not to hurt him, but to protect him. That much he understood. But the pain still cut deep. He thought of Sam, of the Watch, of his vows. He thought of Robb, of Bran and Arya. And then he thought of Daenerys Targaryen, the exiled princess across the narrow sea. If he was Rhaegar's son, then she was his aunt. What did that make him? A rival? An ally? A threat? He didn't even know what he wanted anymore. One evening, Jon received another visitor. This time, it was Tyrion Lannister. The dwarf walked in with his usual limp and wine cup in hand. He gave Jon a crooked smile. "You've been quiet, Snow, or should I say, Stormborn?" Jon looked up sharply. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, voice flat. Tyrion shrugged. "Of course not, but people talk, especially in King's Landing, and my father, he's been more careful than usual lately. That always means something's rotten underneath." Jon said nothing. Tyrion sat down across from him and poured another cup of wine. "Listen, I don't care who your parents were. Bastard, prince, ghost makes no difference to me. But my father? He only plays these games when the stakes are high. Which means, my dear Jon, that you're worth something. Maybe even more than gold." Jon stared at him. "You think I'm a threat? I think you're a story. And in this city, stories get people killed." Tyrion leaned in. "If you want to survive, stop playing the honest northern boy. That version of you won't last a week here." Jon stood. "I'm not here to play games." "No," Tyrion said quietly. "You're here because my father dragged you into one." Later that night, Jon sat by the window in his room, staring out at the stars. He thought of Winterfell, the way the snow crunched under his boots, the smell of the kennels, the way Ghost had followed him everywhere. He missed the cold, clean silence of the north. But he wasn't that boy anymore. A knock came at the door. This time, it was not a Lannister. It was Varys. The spider glided into the room with silent steps, fingers laced together in front of his flowing robes. His voice was soft and smooth. "Jon Snow," he said. "Or shall I say, Jon Targaryen? Forgive me. The realm is full of so many names, it's hard to keep track." Jon didn't rise. "Did Tywin send you?" Varys smiled gently. "Lord Tywin does not command all the whispers in the realm. Some still sing to me." Jon narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" "Peace," Varys said simply. "Balance. Survival. You, my dear boy, may be the only one left who can bring that to Westeros. But not if you let yourself be a pawn in Tywin's game." Jon stood now, angry. "I never asked to be part of this game." "None of us did," Varys replied calmly. "But now you must choose. Will you be a piece, or will you become a player?" Jon didn't answer. He didn't know how. He was still trying to understand who he truly was and what he was supposed to do with that truth. But one thing was clear. He could not return to the Wall. Not now. Not ever. He wasn't just Jon Snow anymore. He was the blood of dragons, and the lions were closing in fast. The next morning Jon awoke to the sound of swords clashing in the yard below his chamber window, Kingsguard sparring, knights training for a war that never seemed far from reach. He watched them for a moment, realizing they trained not for honor or defense, but for control, for survival. In King's Landing, everyone trained for war, even those who never touched a blade. Jon hadn't spoken to Tywin again since their last meeting, but he felt the old lion's presence everywhere. His silence was louder than a threat. It was a reminder, you belong to us now, and Jon hated it. He needed a way out, but not just to flee. He needed to understand what power he held and how to use it before someone else used it for him. He found Tyrion again that afternoon in the gardens, drinking and tossing a gold coin at a lazy crow that wouldn't fly away. "I need answers," Jon said, skipping pleasantries. Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "Answers are dangerous here." "So are lies." Tyrion sighed and motioned him to sit. "You're looking for the truth, Jon, but let me warn you, the truth has teeth, and it rarely sets anyone free. Most times, it just bites harder." "I still need it." Tyrion studied him. "Very well. The truth is, you're a threat to everyone in power. My father fears the Targaryen name because it carries the memory of fire and rebellion. Robert would kill you if he believed you were Rhaegar's son. Cersei would poison you in your sleep just for breathing the same air. And Daenerys, well, you're a rival to her throne. So what will you do, boy? Bend the knee, run, or make them all bleed?" Jon was silent. Tyrion leaned forward. "You can't stay in this castle, and you can't go back to the Wall. You have one choice left. Find the people who don't want you dead. That list is short, but it still exists." Jon asked quietly, "Where would I go?" Tyrion grinned. "Across the narrow sea. To Essos. I have a contact, a smuggler. He's fast, he's quiet, and most importantly, he's not stupid. I can get you on a ship tonight." "Why are you helping me?" "Because," Tyrion said, standing up, "the world needs a better kind of ruler, one who knows what it means to be nothing before becoming something. And maybe, just maybe, I want to watch my father lose a game for once in his life." That night, under moonlight, Jon dressed in plain clothes and left the Red Keep through a servant's passage near the old dragon skulls. Tyrion was waiting in the shadows with a short man in a tattered cloak, the smuggler. No names were exchanged, only nods. But they were not alone. As they approached the docks, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. Jaime Lannister. "The boy doesn't leave," he said, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Tyrion moved between them. "Let him go, Jaime. He's not your enemy." Jaime looked at his brother. "He might not be today, but if he stays, he becomes a problem. You know it. Father knows it. That's why he brought him here, to see how dangerous he could be." "I don't want a crown," Jon said suddenly. "I just want to be free." Jaime studied him. For a moment, his golden hand hung heavy at his side. Then he stepped back. "Then run fast, because if he changes his mind, there'll be no mercy next time." Jon nodded. Moments later, he was on a small ship, the sails already catching the wind. King's Landing faded behind him like a nightmare. As the sea opened before him, Jon stood on the deck and looked to the east. He didn't know what he would find in Essos. Allies, enemies, answers. But he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer a bastard. He was the son of fire and ice. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't following someone else's path. He was forging his own. The ship sailed eastward under the pale light of dawn. Jon stood alone at the bow, his dark hair whipping in the sea breeze. Salt clung to his lips. The waves beneath him carried more than just water. They carried something heavier. Destiny. He hadn't spoken much to the smuggler, but the man was discreet and fast. They were bound for Pentos, where Tyrion said an ally waited. A merchant lord who dealt in secrets, coin, and politics. Jon didn't care for merchants, but he needed answers, and Tyrion had insisted this man could help. In Pentos, Jon met him, Illyrio Mopatis, a man with heavy rings and heavier words. He welcomed Jon with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So, the wolf is also a dragon," Illyrio said, studying Jon like a rare relic. "And the lion wanted you caged, not crowned. Typical." Jon didn't smile. "I'm not here to be a king," he said quietly. Illyrio chuckled. "Ah, but in Essos, that doesn't matter. Here, it's not what you want. It's what your name means. Targaryen blood calls to fire, calls to war. And you, my dear prince, may not want a crown, but others will still try to place one on your head." Jon's hands clenched. He had fled Westeros to escape that very fate. He had no love for thrones. He didn't dream of dragons. He only wanted truth and peace, both of which now seemed further away than ever. But fate had other plans. News reached them quickly. King Robert was dead. "A boar," they said. "Drunken hunting accident." But Illyrio only smiled when he heard it. "How convenient," he said. "And now his son sits the throne." Or so they claim. Jon felt it in his gut. Tywin had moved again. The game hadn't ended when Jon left, it had just evolved. With Robert gone, the throne was in play again, and the Lannisters were tightening their grip on it. Then, more news. Daenerys Targaryen, last daughter of the dragon, had hatched 3 dragons in the east. Fire returned to the world. She was raising an army of freed slaves, taking cities, growing in power. A true Targaryen. Jon should have been afraid of her. He should have seen her as a rival. But all he felt was curiosity, maybe even a pull. She was blood, family. The only other person in the world who might understand what it meant to be born of a war, hidden from birth, and burdened with a name that could burn kingdoms. Illyrio leaned in one day and whispered, "You should meet her. Join her. Together, you could change the world." Jon didn't answer. But he thought about it every night, until finally he agreed. Illyrio arranged the passage. By now, Jon had grown sharper. He watched every word spoken around him. He learned how to disappear in a crowd, how to read men's faces, how to spot liars in a room full of smiles. He was becoming someone new, Not just a soldier, not just a son, but something between them. Something dangerous. When he finally met Daenerys, it was not as a Targaryen prince, but as a wary stranger. She looked at him with curiosity and suspicion, flanked by unsullied and fire-breathing beasts. "You're the son of Rhaegar?" she asked, quietly. Jon nodded. "That's what they say. And what do you say?" He looked her in the eyes. "I say I was raised to be a man of the Watch. I say I served without knowing who I was, but now I know. And I don't want a throne. I want the truth, and I want peace. If you want the same, then maybe we're not enemies." She studied him for a long time, then finally nodded. "We'll see." That night, as the dragons roared in the distance and Essos trembled under Daenerys' rising flame, Jon stood beside her, unsure of what the future held. But one thing was clear. The Game of Thrones had a new player, and he had fire in his blood and ice in his soul. Westeros wouldn't see him coming, but it would never forget him.